Malawi's new President Lazarus Chakwera has promised to serve rather than rule the people of his country. Chakwera has officially been sworn in Lilongwe as the new President of Malawi. He took his oath of office following the victory in the rerun election on Tuesday that's been seen as a democratic first in Sub-Saharan Africa. He defeated incumbent former President Peter Mutharika with just over 58% of the vote. The rerun was called after Malawi's constitutional court annulled Mutharika's victory in the May 2019 election, citing vote tampering. Malawi's presidential re-election has been hailed as a first in Sub-Saharan Africa. To talk about this in detail, we've invited international relations consultant and analyst Dr. Charles Sinkala. Dr. Sinkala, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening to you, Simpiwe, and good evening to your viewers. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure, Dr. Sinkala, having you on the show. First of all, before we get into what this really means for democracy in Malawi and in particular on the African continent, no doubt former President Mutharika left the presidency with his tail tucked in between his legs, and he left a bitter man who was defeated and discredited. So what then do you read into him not showing up at the swearing-in ceremony?
Absolutely. Firstly, Simpiwe, I need to congratulate President Lazarus Chakwera, for having achieved, and given hope to the Malawans. You must remember very well, past the 2014 elections and 19, it has been a very big problem in Malawi, and the people of Malawi have decided now to have their hopes high, to keep their hopes high, even during the COVID-19 pandemic. To analyze the problem of or the situation in Malawi regarding former President Peter Mutharika, it has been as a result of his coming into power, and he did not necessarily come as a result to come and resolve the Malawian problems. You must remember that his brother, the late President of Malawi, Dingo Mutharika, is the one who was controlling the party, but he's the incumbent in the presidency of Malawi has been a very unusual one, but he divided the nation. Him coming from the southern part of Malawi has had entrenched the very bad rhetoric in politics. You must remember 2014 and 2019 elections, which were allegedly rigged. Joyce Banda, the former president, as well, was banned, and other political opponents from participating in politics. He cannot be happy. He's identified that he's only accepting defeat because he wants to maintain peace, but he's not accepting defeat as a result, but he's not a popular candidate.
And it does look like he's out in the cold, as he's now been stripped of all immunity, and incoming president, or rather President Chakwera, now inherits all the immunity that is accorded to a president. Do you think that he will take this lying down?
No, I don't think so. And actually, I pray that former President Peter Mutharika stays in politics, just to be a better contender to debate issues in Parliament. I think the Lazarus has got a very big challenge. That challenge, I think, is the only job he will have to divide his 60 months in power. But the first thing he has to start with is to unite the country, which is broken as a result of division of politics. Though most of the people have voted in from the central Malawi, other people, parts of Malawi, like the southern part, which they have voted Peter Mutharika, he has to reconcile with them and those who never even voted for him. I think he's got a very difficult task ahead of him, but with the support of other political parties and the people, especially he's running towards the elections of both the 2019 and the 2020 election, where he used a very good strategy, which I liked, and I envy that other African nations should also learn from that. Is a strategy to have all political parties or opposition parties to participate in what he called the alliance Tonse. Tonse, I think it's in Chewa, it means togetherness. So his nine alliance, tripartite people, including the one who came third in the last elections, has really helped him to scale. But even saying that, him being a pastor, spend almost 2 decades as a clergy, that does not automatically give him a hand to lead, because there are 2 different sectors. Leading the country and the economy, is 2 different things than leading the church. So he has to find a solution and way and how to unite the people of Malawi.
Dr. Singala, it's very rare on the African continent for a country to go back for an election rerun, and then the opposition, emerges as the ultimate victors. Well, in often cases that countries go back to a rerun, it's always the incumbent party or the incumbent president or the ruling party that always, goes back and reclaims power. What does this tell you as, on the issue of the growth or the strengthening of democracy on the African continent? Can Malawi be now used as a litmus test for African countries?
Correct, Sipiwe. That's unprecedented. It has never happened. You remember very well in 2017 in Kenya, President Uhuru Kenyatta and his opponent Odinga, they had a fight, a very bitter fight through the courts. And the only thing we have learned that, mostly elections in Africa where they complain or whatever is how to pass a case before the judges. The judges decide on empirical evidence, and what has transpired, merely not accepting the defeat of the elections does not constitute somebody to have won the elections. You must present evidence. And I think the 2 countries, Malawi and Kenya, have actually showed that the case was presented very well. But, in the case of Kenya, the incumbent President Uhuru Kenyatta, which was obvious, but you take because it's got the machinery and it's got all the processes to win the elections as taking that part of an advantage. But in the case of Malawi, it's a different scenario. It's unprecedented that an opposition will come out victorious from the rerun. It is actually stupidity for Peter Mutharika to complain about the rigging and unfairness of the elections in Malawi, because he was at the core and the center of establishing the mechanism within 13 months of the elections. He's the one who had to make sure that the elections are free and fair, because the judgment had to indicate that these elections for the rerun, these are the conditions that you have to meet. In addition to those conditions, that one who's supposed to be victorious must come at least 50 plus 1%, rather than the ones which they had 38 and 36 or 35, 36 respectively. So this is, it's a sign that the people of Africa, they're actually tired of politics and promises in the system of trying to promise them a better life. They demand accountability, they demand transparency, they demand results, and they demand that the leaders become honest in terms of dealing with the issues which affect the people. And I think it's high time that African leaders, they learn to understand that their term on office is staged to 60 months, and within that 60 months they must pick up what sector or what area are they advancing the energy to produce to add as a participant in the development of the country. In this case, President Lazarus Chakwera, I think he has to work on unity. Unity we have had it demonstrated by Rwandanese President Paul Kagame after the genocide, where he has united the people. He doesn't call them the Hutus or the Tutsis, he calls them the Rwandanese. We have to see this as well in Malawi, where they call the people as Malawans and not the Chewas and the other tribes. This is, it's actually very overwhelming. I could see and a lot of praises from different political parties, especially the opposition from Zimbabwe. Chamisa also tweeted a very good tweet that, this is what we need to do unprecedented things in politics, because now the things have changed. The politics is not about the leaders themselves. The politics is now about the people who have to take the center stage to demand what they want.
You know, Dr. Sinkala, it's safe to say that the outcome of this election is not surprising at all. I mean, judging by the rigmarole and all the debacle that came after the election of former President Peter Mutharika in that disputed election, and, fast forward to a couple of months later, wherein that landmark constitutional court judgment, and now the election of an opposition leader. I mean, it's safe to say that the outcome is not surprising at all. It's what most Malawians were expecting. But what is most surprising, though, is the win margin, the margin at which Mr. Chakwera has won this election. What does that tell you about Mr. Chakwera himself? Is he the messiah that Malawians have been waiting for? Is he the one leader that, that will lead the people who want accountability and the people who want a solid leadership?
Yeah, Simpiwe, I don't want to use the word messiah. This is what was used in Burundi as well. That always disastrous outcomes. There's no messiah. There's no God-sent a leader to lead the people. I mean, the people choose the leader to lead them. Yes, this has come at a good time because, the leadership of former President Peter Mutharika, it was a decisive one. He did not know how to handle the government. His tenure in office was full of corruption and, a selective leadership. And many of them, like I mentioned earlier, political opponents were banned. But, the leadership of Lazarus Chakwera, I think because of him starting with an angle of trying to use other political parties to tell them, guys, listen, we're working towards building Malawi. We're not working against each other. Can we join hands together and work? But, again, we don't know how long he can hold those people because the 9 political parties who joined him in an alliance pact, they've got their own ambitions. So he has to impress them in form of giving them positions in government. But if he gives them positions in government, is he going to be in control of trying to achieve his goals to unite the country? But we only hope that, since they have made an historic event in electoral processes in Malawi and in Africa at large, he has more support and the will, the political will, economical will to bring back the country on the course.
I mean, he certainly needs to be given the benefit of the doubt because he seems to be injecting a new dynamism into the whole administration of a country. I mean, just to quote his speech, which some have said it was quite a poetic speech. He said that he wants to lead a government. He has faith in the possibility of a government that serves, not a government that rules, a government that inspires, not a government that infuriates, a government that listens, not a government that shouts. I mean, what kind of country or rather administration is President Chakwera inheriting? I mean, what are some of the most pressing challenges that he has to deal with?
Simpiwe is inheriting a broken country. Malawi is not at peace. Malawi is broken politically, economically, is not doing very well. But what I like about it, like what you likely mentioned, he has been spending much of the time preaching in trade for over 2 decades. He's actually established and seen that autocratic type of regime does not solve any issues in the country. Actually, it actually perpetrates those who does the opposite, in terms of corruption and running the government. And that's leadership, a leader has to have a vision on how he's going to achieve and how he's going to help the people. And I think that's important. And his vision of trying to say, I do not want to be called a boss, I want to be called this, because you have seen the negativity on these people when they are appointed to the higher office of leadership and they are called a ruler. They have so much power that they even themselves, they are surprised and they think they are the messiahs. They suffer from what I call the messiah complex syndrome. They feel that the only ones God has told to preside over the country, and they don't see themselves stepping at the end of the term. So it is completely different from the way, though we have Malawans as well, especially as the international community and the regional communities had very high hopes on how former President Joyce Banda came into power, but all those hopes were short-lived. The coming of Peter Mutharika, also had the little hopes, but the people got so disappointed. But I think people now should not be negative and they look behind and what is happening. Or what they want is to assist and help President, the current president now to propel the country forward, even if the pace will be slow. But at least would have laid the foundation of unity, a foundation of trying to unite the country politically as well as economically. We can see the celebration in Malawi, how it was packed. It was just the leadership for former President Peter Mutharika not to attend the inauguration. He should have been there and they say, congratulations, you are the best man. But let's meet in Parliament and let's debate on issues. His party of Lazarus has come back after 26 years when it was out of power. So even former President Peter Mutharika, if his policies or if he has learned from his mistakes and he wants to help the people of Malawi and Africa at large to set a precedent, like what is started happening now, he's supposed to stay there, to advise, and where people are wrong, they must be corrected.
Yeah, and more especially because handing over power to a new president, was the only legitimate reason that kept Peter Mutharika in office for the past 13 months. Now, just before I let you go, Dr. Sinkala, we don't have much time, unfortunately. How significant is President Chakwera's win? Will it find expression on the continent's long-suffering opposition groups? Is it enough to give them some sort of hope?
Yes, definitely. I've actually organized myself an organization to unite the opposition political parties in Africa. Okay. And part of the agenda is to have the unity in opposition political parties to be full and the participants of the development of the country. They should not be opponents to the government. They should be invited and, share ideas, advise the current government, respect the current government, and promise the people that if the government does not do the promises or what they have promised, then they can go there and assist, instead of what has been happening by opposition political parties tearing the countries apart and making the people suffer on the ground. And okay. I think, if 60% lead has given an indication that Africa has now started getting matured in terms of politics and how we do the election.
All right. Great chatting to you, Dr. Sinkala. Thank you so much for your time. That was Dr. Charles Sinkala, political analyst, speaking to us live via Skype. Let's take a quick break now. We'll have more in a moment.